So now that the food has digested and the emotions of what has been a crazy past 24 hours have started to subside, I wanted to give you guys a recap of my experience competing internationally here in India, and also answer a lot of the questions that have been asked and a lot of the narratives that have been created, and give you guys my specific viewpoints from not only being an athlete, but from simply just being a fan of this sport. Now, in full, we have to understand the craziness starts not here, but yet what it took to get here. So we have to start with the last episode of Men's Physique Radio, because it was in that podcast that I realized, wait a minute, I never got confirmation that my contract was signed. So I started to take a look just to make sure that the contract was in, there was no issues. For some reason, I just had a gut feeling. And when I took a look at it, I realized my name wasn't on the list. So when that happened, full panic mode took in play. I actually had to get up from the podcast and go downstairs to type an email, send it out to the IFBB, and try to explain my situation just a little bit more. And thank God, through technical error, we were able to get through. Now, there's no question that 12 hours before 100% knowing I was going to compete just raised cortisol through the roof. Like, I legitimately did not know if I was going to compete before I even started to drive to the airport. It wasn't until I was in the airport waiting to take my first flight to New York that I got an email saying that I was confirmed. So I was fully planning to at least fly to New York with no confirmation that I was going to be on the list or added to the list. So again, it tells you just how much I did want to compete here if I was going to be taking that risk. Now, like I said, through God's will, I was able to be added to the list, and I flew from Tampa to New York. Very easy flight. We had a quick layover, and then the crazy long flight took place from New York all the way to India. And that flight in itself was 15 hours. And that flight was brutal. It was overnight, which was probably like the best case scenario, but it was also rough because we were leaving one time zone and entering like a whole nother day zone, if that makes sense. And that flight was definitely weird because we were entering so many different time zones on that flight. So for those who aren't aware, I live in Tampa, Florida, which is an Eastern Standard Time zone, but in India, it's a 9.5 hour time difference. So my body, my mind, my sleep schedule was in one zone. Meanwhile, I was completely in another. So when I landed in India, it was Thursday, but when I left Tampa, it was Tuesday. So it was definitely a unique experience that I have never experienced, but it was one that I really had to make sure that I dialed in, because if I was going to take on this trip, this experience in itself, I had to make sure that I had my ducks in a row. And I think I did that pretty well, because when I got here, I really didn't miss a beat. My body wasn't too crazy. The adjustment wasn't any kind of madness. I actually landed, and throughout that crazy flight process, I actually lost weight, believe it or not, which most people's fear would be holding a lot of water. But again, we were active on the flight, we got up multiple times, we drank enough fluids, and we really just primed our body and mental for that flight. It doesn't change the fact that it was still rough on my body. Like, in general, it was not easy, and my sleep patterns were completely off. It was an experience, to say the least, just getting here. But again, we got here, and that's what matters. The fact that I was even able to compete, it was a blessing. So I was not going to complain about a rocky, flight and time zone difference. So now that we are here in India, we are 3 days out from the show. So when it comes to Indian culture, my biggest fear was the unknown. Food, communication, standards, even to the point where I didn't know if my wife could wear just what we were able to wear in the US, and be disrespectful for their culture. So there's a lot of things that we had to look up to prepare ourselves for. And we did that. And she was well prepared, I was well prepared, but one thing I was not prepared for example, was something as simple as beef. Like, they don't have beef here, or grocery stores. So we had to go to the market, which it's like basically think of like a yard sale with a bunch of people all in a row, and they sell different things, right? Like, there was a meat shop where they were literally cutting heads off of chickens next to a store that sold notebooks. I'm not kidding, that was a real life situation. I tried to control as much as possible by simply bringing what I could here. And we did just that. I bought a rice cooker, right? I packed 2 days worth of food for a worst case scenario. So yes, there was 2 days worth of food in my carry-on as well as checked bag. So we had to make sure there was no gray area when it came to missed execution. And we brought, again, things like Rice Krispie treats, Reese's, honey, you know, a lot of the Americanized foods that it takes to pump up backstage and just, again, kind of keep your ducks in a row. And I was very happy because when we got here, really did not miss a beat at all. We got chicken at the market because there was no beef, and we offsetted the fats that we typically get from the beef utilizing almond butter. Problem fixed. Now, the food was squared away, the hotel was squared away. We were very lucky. We had a place with a full kitchen, microwave, fridge, washing machine. This place was absolutely amazing. So again, another thing that we really wanted to prioritize was creating some simplicity around us. Now, before we get into the show in itself, I have to talk about the Indian fan base and the overall bodybuilding community that is made up by that fan base. You hear it often that overseas, it's so much different, but you really don't fully grasp it until you see it with your own eyes. The second I got off my flight, I was greeted by a fan. Very excited and happy the fact that I was even in India. He took a picture, I met his coach, and again, warm welcome from the very start. This first day I went to the gym. The following day, I was greeted with flowers from the owner. I trained with Buan Jalhan, right? And the entire gym lined up to take photos, meet us, give us personal tours, ask us if we wanted X, wanted Y. It was just extremely overwhelming, but yet and still something that I felt as a professional, like bodybuilder, I felt almost like, damn, like this is what it feels to be a professional. And I never felt that before. Like before, I would always say being a professional is simply what you do on a day-to-day, right? But I never seen it from the other perspective of what people see, you know, us as professionals. You know, I don't know if that makes sense, where it's like they could love us. Like, I don't know, it was really cool, man. And that was such a warm welcome. And honestly, that was an added layer of pressure, you know, because they wanted me to succeed. They were cheering me on, and it was just something that I wasn't necessarily expecting, you know? So that was probably just the highlight. The people here were so welcoming, they were so nice, they were so respectful, and they just, again, were appreciative of the title of being an IFBB pro and the hard work it took to get there. And that was something that honestly was a highlight of my trip. I never felt like what it felt like to be a professional until I was here. Like I took photos with fans, I signed autographs, you know, all of that cool stuff, but it's just different here. You know, they truly see you in a different light. So if you ever have an opportunity to compete internationally and you are a pro, or you're one day going to be a pro, I highly recommend it, you know, because again, you'll feel what it feels like to be a professional and wear that title with pride. Now, for the actual show in itself, we have to also start off with the fan base because stepping out on that stage, guys, the crowd was absolutely insane. Now, there was no question it was a warm welcome for me. But when it got to that stage, the Indian fan base, they made it very clear that they were there for their Indian competitors. So anybody who was an Indian competitor walking across that stage, the announcer made sure to say, "And from India." And the whole crowd went crazy. They didn't care who you were. It doesn't matter. They went nuts. But again, before we get on the stage, let's talk about behind the stage, the athletes, the opportunity to first meet them and greet them and get a chance to know them. It was, again, such a warm welcome. A lot of them were from India, some were from Iran, Iraq, you know, all over the country, or all over the world. And that's something that was so cool because I met so many different people, and the one thing that we all had in common was the love of bodybuilding, and we came to a common ground because of that, which I thought was just something that was so overlooked oftentimes, like brothers in iron. So we all had a mutual respect for each other. Backstage was, you know, really cool. There was enough space. There wasn't tons of competitors. We had a cool little pump up area. I had some cables, which is uncommon for the States. We had like a little bit of dumbbell racks, and again, the tanning was, you know, clean, consistent. Like everything was really ran very professionally backstage. And I have to give them a lot of credit for that. A lot of times, you know, when you're doing different shows, some of the biggest stressors for us is, you know, timing. inefficiencies with just simply communication with the venue or the people running the show. Like, that was not necessarily the issue at all here. It was ran very well. It was a big expo attached to it. So like, it was a lot of things going on, guys. When I mean a big expo, I'm talking about bigger than the Olympia. I'm talking about bigger than the Arnold. It was absolutely insane. It was massive. They had some of the biggest names in bodybuilding here: Ryan Terry, Andre Dayu. They have their prime minister here with full bodyguards and armored, tanks, literally, and guns walking around the venue. Like, these people, the best were flown out and here to represent. So that's how big this show was. This show was everything to them. This was their Olympia. This was their Olympia, because it is very rare for an Indian bodybuilder to make it to the Olympia. Bhuwan Chauhan was the only one who has ever done it. So it was massive for them. And you can feel it, like, so deep down, that that's all they wanted, was for one of their competitors to make it to the Olympia stage again. So with that, we started tanning, we started getting pumped up. Men's physique was the last category to go on, because it's like their Super Bowl. Like, we are what we see in open bodybuilding back home. Like, that's them here. Like, we are the main attraction, right? So we were the last ones to go on. Final or pre-judging wasn't until like 4 p.m., which is so uncommon. Like, usually in the States, it's like a 9 a.m. pre-judging and 4 a.m. finals. Here, not the case. It was 4 p.m. Pre-judging, and then like 5 o'clock final. So it was very quick, which I do like quick shows, like when it comes to pre-judging finals, but having it later in the day was definitely something that I had to get used to. I'm usually focusing on filling up on 2 meals. This time I had to do it with like 4 meals. So a little bit different. Now, like I mentioned, walking out on stage and experiencing that crowd was just inspirational. It was, I was taken back, because I haven't been in front of a crowd like that since the Olympia. And arguably, this crowd was louder than the Olympia. Maybe not as many people, but the impact and the hype and the passion was there. Like, you could hear it. It was just everywhere. It was nuts. It was just absolutely insane. So we walked out on stage, did my individual routine, and again, first time experiencing that crowd. It was so cool. It actually gave me so much life and energy. I wanted to put on a show. And then it came to comparisons. So comparisons was just a show. I mean, there's not much to say. I was lucky enough to be in the first call-outs. They then dwindled that down to the top 4. And then in that top 4, there was a top 2. And I feel like this is oftentimes when I have every time been in second place, whether it was Jonas, whether it was Edvon, whether it was now here in India, it always got dwindled down to a top 2, which is not necessarily common in bodybuilding. Usually they'll do like a 4, maybe 3, but top 2, it's like, okay, these guys are our guys. So I dwindled down to a top 2. That's when things started to get crazy. So then it was me versus another fellow Indian athlete. And before we get into that, I have to make sure I make this very clear. This athlete was absolutely amazing. Like, he is such a good guy. Talking backstage, he was a massive fan of the content that we create here, Men's Physique Radio. He's a massive fan of the sport, and he actually gave me a lot of credit for helping him get through his prep because of the content that we create. He was extremely thankful to simply just be on that stage. And when you have somebody who is just that passionate about the sport, and shares that passion with you, that's stuff you bond over, man. When you actually are here with a purpose and an intent, you know what I mean? Like, it was just really cool an experience to share that stage with him in that kind of atmosphere, with 2 people who are passionate, they love what they do, and that passion then blended out on stage. And that's what happened, man. In that top 2 battle, I got a lot of energy from the crowd, from simply being in the top 2, and going against somebody who I knew was a worthy competitor. All of those things added up and really forced me to be a better version of myself. So because of that, we went to war. And I was ready, man. I was zoned in, I was focused. I just had an aura, right? Like almost like an adrenaline rush. And again, they called us off. It was a lot of love on stage. And I wanted to make something very clear to him. And a lot of people asked, what did I say to him in this moment? When I grabbed his head, put his head against mine, I pointed to the crowd, and I said, bro, I want you to remember this moment. Because earlier, and this is exactly what I said on stage, because earlier you were an amateur. And now you have an opportunity to go to the Olympia. Look out in the crowd, man. look out. Don't forget this moment. That's exactly what I said. Don't forget this moment. This was special. And we shared that moment. And it's something that when I'm on stage, man, no matter how bad I want to win, I'm never going to downplay or kick somebody or just simply be a lesser version of myself and my character, regardless, just because I want to win. And I wanted him to know that, hey, this moment I wanted to, but I know your story and all the fans and where we are, this culture, this environment. I want you to remember this, man, because it's special. It's a special one. So we walked off during prejudging. Obviously me being me, I'm looking at the videos, I'm looking at the photos, I'm talking to all the people, the fans, just backstage in general. And a lot of times in these moments you'll look at things that are wrong, or things you need to be better. And there was no question, that's what I was self-analyzing myself, saying I need to do this better, do this and that, but nonetheless, I was, getting chirped, bro, you're gonna win, there's no question you're gonna win. And I was like, I don't want to hear it. He's a good athlete, he's a good competitor. When the judges say it, that's when I'll know, right? And I've always said that. Like, I've been in situations, again, top 2, and I've lost every time when I thought I might have won. But I will say, man, I'll be honest here, I definitely thought I had this one. I definitely did. And that's why what makes everything happen next is so bittersweet, and because prejudging was so short, we went right back on for finals. And there was little things that I started to realize and feel and hear that made me think that this wasn't necessarily going to go in my way. Now, first, they wanted to do a confirmation round, which is common. They called 4 guys out. They moved me and the other first place winner to the middle. And again, we were there, pulled us back off. The judge, as we pulled off, said, guys, this was a really, really close one. And I haven't seen the scorecards yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was only by 1 point, which for those who are unaware, it's not necessarily common in shows. Usually it's pretty decisive, where it's, 3 and 6 between first and second, which is basically them saying all the judges had this guy in first, all the judges had this guy in second. But again, that could be the case. I'm not necessarily sure. But with that, they don't typically do like the confirmation round and say like this one is very close. I know that I'm overanalyzing, but I've been in enough shows to realize that's not the case. And also, when you're on stage as an athlete, and also bodybuilders who have been on stage before, I'm sure they can attest to it. When you look at judges and their mouths and things that are going on, you kind of get a sense of what's going on, like the eyes, the feel, and with that, I definitely thought at prejudging I had it based off of the feel of like what I was seeing in prejudging, where the head judge, who makes the decision of where to put people, and then around them he'll get like, hey, I want to see this person next to this person, and they start putting in their scores. I was confident that the head judge liked my look enough on that day to win based off of his movements and how they were moving other athletes around, because honestly I wasn't expecting a top 2, because the other athlete named Anik, he was the one who was probably the most hyped going into the show to be going against myself, and he was in the middle for the majority of the time, and then before they swapped those 2 out. So I thought it was going to be him and I, majority of it, then or at least going to be a top 3 call out. But regardless, they did something at the end of finals that made me realize, solidify that I wasn't going to win. At the end, because they didn't do this for any of the other pro divisions. Again, men's physique might just be like their bigger one, so maybe this is the reason why they did it. So they called out 5th place, 4th place, 3rd place, and then there was top 2. And the way that they then decided to announce the top 2 was confirmation that I wasn't going to win. They said that we're going to put the promoter of the show in the middle, and on the left they're going to have myself, and on the right they're going to have the winner, or the other athlete. And they're gonna just raise the hand of the winner. Like, they're gonna hype it up a little bit, and then they're just gonna have a countdown, and they're gonna raise the hand of the winner. And when I thought about that, it made me realize that they would never bring a US competitor in front of a massive Indian fan base, guys. And when I say massive, I mean, guys, it was insane in there. And raise the hand of an American athlete in front of a completely sold out Indian crowd. That was just, You could not see a ground because of how many people there were. It just wouldn't make sense. It'd almost be disrespectful and rubbing a loss into the Indian community's culture or in their face. So that's the moment I realized it. And yes, I do think of these things on stage. So they called this out and they did these things where it's like, who's gonna win, who's gonna win? They started counting down. And again, that's the moment I knew that my hand was not going to be raised. It was not raised. And then they raised the hand of the Indian athlete named Amir. And again, I'm somebody who, when I lose with grace. I will do the same thing I do with a win as I will do with a loss. You know, so I wanted to make sure I gave him his flowers like I did earlier in that day, to make sure he understood of how big a moment was, to soak it in, and to make sure that you continue to emphasize and double down on your way to the Olympia stage. So since that moment, I've been getting a lot of questions about, how do I feel after the show? Do you think you were robbed? And even before, like going back until my announcement of the fact that I was competing in India, everybody was telling me that you will not win, that it is a corrupt, system in India. And I told them, man, at the end of the day, I'm gonna put my trust into two people: God and the judges in the IFBB, and let the cards fall where they may. So yes, so the reality is I didn't come to India for second place, but I also came here for so much more than first place. This experience was something that I can take with me forever as a fan of bodybuilding. I just recently launched a board short company while I was down here in India. So just that alone has helped me get a lot of exposure. A lot of the Indian community and also bodybuilders want to wear my shorts. Who knows, even the winner might be able to wear my shorts on the Olympia stage. There's a lot of additional reasons why I came down here that I don't feel the need to simply justify. But one thing I do want to say is this, man. People are going to talk down when you're a winner, and they're going to talk down when you are a loser. And if second place is a loss to me, that just tells you how high my standards are for myself. And at the end of the day, all I want to do is compete, get better, and have my hard work be displayed in a manner that I'm very confident with. Consistent progression over perfection. So yes, is this moment hard for me? No question. Do I think I should have won? Truthfully, I do think I should have won. I'm not gonna sit here and say no, I do think that my physique was warranted of a win that day. Do I think it's politics? I don't know. But I've seen situations happen where I might have thought one person won comparative to another, and I'm not gonna sit there and say that's politics. It just didn't go my way. And I will always say this, just like I tell my clients, you will lose more in this sport than you will win. But how you lose speaks more volumes than anything. So with that, I'm happy I came to India. I'm happy I got this experience. I'm happy I've been able to grow my personal brand out here in a way that I never would have been able to do so if I stayed in the States. I love this shit, and I love this sport, and I'm a competitor, and I'm gonna keep going. But those of you who continue to support, I love you guys, I appreciate you guys. And again, we're gonna keep moving along because we're going to the O, baby. And I promise you, it's gonna be different. It's gonna be different. We have a lot of time to make sure that that different is warranted of something truly something special. So with that being said, I love you guys, I appreciate you guys, and I'm telling you guys now, man, the redemption story continues. I'll see you guys at the O. If you are interested in coaching, I'm now taking on 4 more spots for the 2024 season. All you have to do is click the link below. I would love to pick your brain, hear a little bit more about what your goals are, and see if we could be a good fit. And as always, guys, I love you, I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.